Nelson, how's it going, man?
Oh, man, it's been busy.
Yeah.
Just run the rat race, buddy. How about you?
Oh, no, man, I haven't been that busy, man. I'm trying to cut back. Hey,
Really?
yeah. Why don't we talk about business on this episode and get into why we seem to romanticize it and simultaneously hate it?
Let's do it.
Hello, couch surfers. You're listening to Put 'em on the Couch. I'm Jason McCoy, your host, flanked here by my good friend, colleague, better half, Sir Nelson Boyer. Nelson.
Am I a sir now?
Why not, man?
All right, I'm a sir.
You're definitely busy enough to be someone of high status.
I used to be somebody of high status.
Nelson, today I want to talk about something that's getting quite a bit of attention lately, especially following the pandemic. There's this notion that everybody is just too busy to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of feel it. You know, it depends on what I'm doing, where I'm doing it. But I kind of feel, I don't know. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed with all the stuff I've got going on. I mean, you know, do you ever like catch yourself like even during this podcast? Like sometimes I'm like looking at the clock and I'm like, okay, I know what's next. I'm in my mind. I'm already planning on like, what I got to do all day.
Nexting. Yeah, what comes next?
Is that a thing?
Man, I got to refill this coffee pretty soon. I've got to go take a bathroom break. And
it sounds like you're quiet quitting, whatever the hell that is. It sounds like you got nothing going on, man. It sounds like you're just relaxed.
Yeah, good point. Well, look, man, there's no shame in being a little busy. I mean, that's the American motto. That's the American way. You know, as long as I can remember, it was drilled into me, baby, work, baby, work. Be productive, grind, hustle. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Every piece of media I've ever attended to, every conversation I've ever had, every book I've ever read, particularly about American culture, in general Western culture, has been anybody can do it. Anybody can rise to the top as long as they're not lazy and they're willing to put in the effort.
Well, I would argue that that's true and that anybody can, but just because anybody can, it doesn't mean it's even approaching reality. You know,
or that they should.
Most of the social mobility we see in the United States is actually in the other direction, right? To the extent that there's any, chances are you're going down.
Yeah.
But usually, well, you came up.
Yeah.
You came up. But you did it.
I've been thinking about this. How busy are we? I know how busy I am, but how busy are we? What I did, Nelson, since I am a college professor.
How are you quantifying busy?
Well, I went to social media groups that I'm a member of. Each have about 20,000 members. And for the past 24 hours, I've been surveying them regarding one question. I just wanted to know how many emails they receive on in an average work day. And 50% of them said they got no more than about 25 a day, which seems pretty doable.
25 emails a day?
Yeah, pretty doable.
All
Most
right.
people I would ask would probably say 25 emails is doable. Now, that's just how many they received. That doesn't say anything about what they had to do with those emails, what kind of work went into trying to answer those emails. And then another 30% basically said 50, upwards of 50.
50?
Yeah, 50 emails a day. Now we're approaching, right, maybe a little too much per day, 8-hour day. And then, of course, there was another 10% or so that said up to 75, and then maybe
that's crazy.
5 or 10% up to 100. And very few, of course, say over 100, luckily. But my thought is email is one way to determine how busy someone is, particularly someone who works an office job, someone who does like knowledge-based work, right? Like a college professor like myself, someone in consulting, finance, maybe something like that, right? An accountant. And I thought, well, just one way of measuring busyness, email, indicates that they're spending a good number of minutes, perhaps hours in an 8-hour day just doing email. That's to say nothing of the number of meetings. There was a study not too long ago that asked office workers about how often they went to meetings. And guess what the average of 10,000 office workers said?
Well, you got to give me a little more color. What type of jobs?
Well, we're talking
just white
about,
collar.
Again, white collar.
Not academics.
No, and let's think about middle management up, maybe.
Okay, so I'm gonna guess some meetings. Oh my God,
a month.
So I know my buddy Sean Juman saying shout out to Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah, so my buddy Sean was telling me I think he's got like he's middle management, white collar guy. And
Works
I mean,
an office job,
he
has
works
a
an
computer.
office job, but he works remote.
Yeah, but has to
But
monitor
I
email.
feel like he's got, I think he said like 3 a day.
That's about right, man. Anywhere from
That's what he said.
anywhere from
That's
50
crazy.
to 70, anywhere from 50 to 75 a week.
And you know what's funny? Because I'll talk to him during these meetings.
Yeah, because he's
I
probably
shouldn't say
zooming,
that.
right? He's probably zooming.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
now
he's
think
just,
about this:
but he's like, I don't even need to be on this
50
thing.
to 75 meetings a month, 12 months a year, 30, 40-year career. What are we talking about here, man? Several years of your life in meetings?
And I think that's a really good question.
And
Is
no-
what exactly are we? Do you need to be in
Yeah,
these?
what are we attaining? What are we getting out of it? Look,
What
I know,
are we getting out? What is your
what's the
boss getting
outcome?
out of it? Yeah.
Well, I think on the one hand, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but meetings, email, they all give us an indication of how busy we are, right?
Yeah.
How well the job or how well your day's being filled up.
Yeah.
And I understand the sort of desire to sort of quantify or measure busyness if you're looking at it through the lens of productivity. Let's use that word. I think that's probably a better word here. I'm guessing historically, since, agrarian society, but certainly just right before the Industrial Revolution, we were needing to measure output. Right, you have to
Well, you had
measure
to,
farm
because-
meals. You
exactly, you
have
had
to measure
to,
how
yeah.
much water you need. You have to
managed
measure
food production was necessary for our
and still
survival.
is. Don't get me wrong.
And still is. Yeah.
And manufacturing, whether it's heavy metals or whether it's paper, you got to sort of manage and monitor and
Productivity.
productivity matters.
100%.
And one way to do that would be to measure how busy someone is. Right? How many hours are they on the job? Or how many of these widgets are they cranking out? And so on and so forth. Right?
Output, yes.
One way to
Not
measure.
necessarily how busy, but how much are you producing?
Well, you can't. The idea is that if you aren't working the fields, if you aren't standing there attending to the machinery, right? If you don't have it turned on, it can't do any output, right? It needs
Right.
somebody to man it for a certain number of hours.
Right.
So hours would be a pretty good indication of productivity.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, the best-selling writer, computer scientist turned podcaster, Cal Newport, he talks a lot about business, productivity, and what he calls deep work versus pseudo-productive work. And he argues that nothing wrong with being busy if it's genuinely accomplishing two things. One of them, it needs to be accomplishing something meaningful, and two, it needs to be sort of deep and connected with the overall sort of agenda for what it is you're hoping to achieve in the first place. So in other words, if my job is knowledge-based and I'm trying to teach a person how to become a better researcher, and I'm teaching a course this summer in experimental design research methodology. And if the outcome, the big picture is I want to make students better researchers, better equip them, make them feel more confident, make them want to do it, that's a noble output. And to the extent that my busyness, what I'm doing sort of yields that, great. But what about emails? What about meetings? What about time on task? What about all of these little metrics that seem to work and have always worked for blue collar workers? Maybe we're misapplying those metrics. Maybe we're trying to measure knowledge work, knowledge outcomes with these old outdated measures, right? In other words, why do you need to worry about me? Why do you need to worry about a knowledge worker being in the office a certain number of hours?
But you're talking about jobs that are relatively new, right? So it would make sense that we haven't caught up for metrics to measure how productive these fields actually are.
But yet we have. I mean, we do have success rates in terms of graduation. We do have employer surveys that tell us, hey, you did raise a good student, so to speak. We have some indications, but admittedly, those take a little while, right?
Right.
And maybe that's just it. We have this I want it now mentality, right? We have this fast food mentality. A boss is going to say, I can't know how well you are doing on the job.
Right.
If that job requires you to work with someone for several weeks until we can potentially get any output. And then on top of that, they've got to go out into the world of work themselves and generate some experience and then report back a couple of years later saying, oh, this class was worth it.
Right.
So maybe the boss feels like, well, I have no other choice but to look and see when the person got here. How long are they working? Were they in class on time?
Did they leave early?
Did they leave early? Do they have a certain number of emails they've sent? Did they write a certain number of letters of recommendation? And so on and so forth, right? But Newport argues that that's counterproductive, especially if you are measuring somebody by all of these little metrics that don't necessarily go into the meaningful outputs, then you're going to be up against it. And what I mean by that, what he means by that is you're not going to get deep, creative, meaningful work out of it. So it's going to create resentment. It's going to create burnout, stress. Newport tells the story of Jane Austen. You remember her?
Oh, yeah. Pride and Prejudice.
So she's got 4 or 5 really famous books: Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, I believe, Sense and Sensibility. My wife likes those books. I'm sure millions of Americans and people all over the world do. But here's the thing. There were several tales historically about Jane Austen being a go-getter, about how she spent all of these little pieces of time that she had when she wasn't doing something else. She would write her thoughts on scraps of paper. Then, of course, she would hide them out of maybe embarrassment or fear that someone would judge her for writing, because that wasn't seen as productive, maybe. She wasn't famous at this time. Then her father died. And when her father died, she and her mother and brother went off to a cottage, and they abandoned all of the regular work they were doing. She sat in front of a window and started actually writing. This is when she published a whole book. So allegedly, all these scraps of paper that she had been doing never produced a book. We later find out from her and other very reliable sources after she had written these books that there's no such thing as her writing things on scraps of paper. That was all invented to create this illusion that, quote, you can do it all, you can have it all. Just use what little bit of time you have in the cracks of an otherwise busy day to do these fun, frivolous things. Lunch, writing, podcasting, whatever. You don't really need large chunks of time to do it. Cal Newport said, listen, she wrote 4 or 5 of these books over a 5-year period in that cottage because she had uninterrupted, unstructured time and freedom to do deep, creative work. She died after she published those 5 books very shortly, which is kind of a tragedy because she lived most of her life busy, milking the cows, sweeping the floor, doing all of the custodial things and all the day-to-day things that all of us seem to have to do. And again, I'm not suggesting that people who are busy stop doing these custodial things, right? Stop doing email or stop taking their kids to soccer. But I am suggesting that maybe some of it is a little self-imposed.
Maybe some of it is. And I think you're also describing something that I think is, if not uniquely American, it's certainly something that we focus on, especially post-pandemic. I'm
glad you brought that up.
I'm not seeing this.
Okay.
And I'm not seeing the reaction to it the way I've seen here with people, like I said, quiet quitting, or I'm not seeing a reaction to it in other Western democracies, Western societies.
Is that because other Western democracies actually learned that they can trust their employees, that employees can do good, meaningful work?
No, I mean,
with flexibility.
I've lived in
flexibility.
I've lived in European democracies. I've lived there for a long period of time. You saw what happened with France.
Yeah,
they raised their retirement age to 62, and people lost it. They're still losing it.
Of course, in France, I think they also do not allow anyone to email someone after the workday hours. Right?
I think that's
the email
true.
won't even make it
correct.
to you, or you'll get in trouble for doing it. Get reprimanded.
I think that's correct.
In
Germany. So I got a really good work story for you. Right? I wanted to get a tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
In Germany. It was right after the Red Sox won their first World Series in 2004. Mm-hmm. So my wife and I were downtown. We were
and
in
the
our
first thing you
apartment.
thought was, I want to fly to Germany and get a tattoo.
I lived in Germany. We lived downtown.
Now I get it.
We lived downtown. So there's
Germany.
a tattoo artist that I really like. He put a lot of ink on this right arm here. Mm-hmm. And I go to his tattoo parlor. It's kind of quiet.
Is he out of business now? Because he probably ran out of ink, all that shit you got on your arm, man.
I'm sure I paid him enough.
Yeah.
So we get up there, and everything's closed. And all of a sudden, Andrea, my artist, drives by on a hog. Just, sees me at his store, turns around.
An actual pig.
An actual pig.
That is amazing. Did he have a saddle on it? Was he just riding a sweaty bastard?
No, he's just big old.
Although I don't think they sweat.
Well, just
the Harley Davidson.
Picture a typical tattoo guy and give him a German accent, and that's Andrea.
Give him a motorcycle.
Big dude, right? So he sees me standing out there and pulls over, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I was just, I wanted to come get a tattoo, and I thought you'd be."
Hell, what's he doing? He ain't in the shop. Is he quiet quitting?
No,
or
he
loudly
said,
quitting on his
he
hog?
said it's a German holiday. I said, oh, okay, I'll come back tomorrow. He says, no, here's what we're going to do. I'll go in right now and do a tattoo for you. If the police come by, I can get in big trouble because it is against the law to open a business on a German holiday. They don't play. It's not like it is against the law. You cannot open a business.
In America, we salivate. The plumbers salivate waiting on my call on Saturdays so they can charge me twice the going rate.
Right.
And I can feel good about them coming out. Oh, thank you so much.
So
$500 for coming out, that's not a problem.
Well, this guy, I'm sure this guy upcharged me a little bit.
Yeah, but still.
But
not enough to compensate for the fine he would have gotten if...
well, he said what you do is you just tell him we're making a tattoo party. We're having a party. Just tattoo party. The police actually showed up 10 minutes after he opened the shop.
way.
Yeah, the police knocked on his door and called him over, and they talked about it. And he said, this is my friend. We're making a tattoo party. We're just doing tattoos.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So listen.
So it wasn't for business purposes.
Anytime you go to Europe, you'll find this too.
Mm-hmm.
On Sunday, businesses are closed. There's a pharmacy, one that's going to stay open, and the European, they know in town. Okay, this pharmacy, it's rotating, and they're on call. They're not open. They're on call. You need medicine. Okay, you're not going in there for gum or for whatever. It's a pharmacy with actual drugs. But there was something very, very, and I started it. I hated it when I started living in Germany.
Yeah.
I ended up really loving this concept of true hardcore differentiation between work time and leisure time. And you know what they did with each other on Sunday? Every bar or pub was open, and that was it. Yeah. They would sit there at the pub after church, or they would just sit there and have a beer together and talk.
Well, look, let's take a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, I want you to talk a little bit about any historical precedents for this idea about busyness, and perhaps connect that with the ruling class versus the working class.
Sure.
Rich people don't sleep 8 hours a day. That's a third of your life.
If you want it, if you want this, it's work.
Work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week.
Because I got the hustle muscle. And he's like, what? I said, I got the hustle muscle. Work.
Hard work, working hard.
Work hard.
Hard work, work harder.
Work hard. Hard work.
Welcome back, Couch Surfers. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jason McCoy, alongside my host, Nelson Bowyer. We are the cast to Put 'em on the Couch. Talking about this busyness trap today, Nelson.
Yeah, before the break, I was mentioning that there was a real differentiation of work time and leisure time among the Europeans, right?
Okay,
I mean, they have like 6 weeks vacation. They take it. They have to take it.
They try to make a clear distinction between what should be done in the office and what
35
and what, if anything,
weeks.
should be taken home.
And we're really different here.
We're either behind the times, or again, we're just so hard working, driven, crazy Americans that we feel like we can't do that. We can't separate private and public, because if we do, we're going to lose our edge. We're going to lose our advantage.
Our individual history is really built, and you look at the colony.
That history, man.
Our history, our American history, is really built on rugged individualism, right?
Busy.
But the history of our species is really different. I mean, for most of human history, I got to tell you, there was hold on, let me pull it up.
Oh, I thought you were going to go into animals. I was going to say, man, dogs and other kinds of animals, horses, elephants, they've been bred to be busy. Like, all animals, especially mammals, love to work. Don't get me wrong.
So there was an author, James Sussman, all right, and he wrote a book called A Deep History of Work, from the Stone Age to the Age of Robots.
Oh, yeah?
And his focus was on work. And what he found was, for most of our human history, work has been about 15 hours a week, right? And that was all it took to get the calories needed to survive, to procreate.
And that's a good point. And that work, to that end, was to feed oneself, right? To find a heterosexual sex partner willing to lay down with you and maybe procreate. But there was no checking emails. There was no running the rat race just for the sake of being busy, right?
No.
They weren't virtue signaling back in the caveman days, right?
Right.
If you go to someone today, Nelson, and say, man, what's up? How's it going? You know what the number one answer is today?
I'm going to guess busy.
Yeah, same thing
That's
you
what I
told me
would
at
say,
the top
right?
of the show,
busy.
right?
Yeah, I'm busy.
Or better yet, you're right, the new age version of it is crazy busy. Have you heard anyone say that one?
I say that.
Yeah, crazy busy.
Crazy busy.
And I wonder sometimes, is this the new I'm well, or I'm doing good? Or
I
is there
think so.
something else going on? In other words, is that just a rhetorical device that we use to, like, move things along so that or so that we don't look rude, we have to answer people? Or is there something else going on? I mean, I sometimes feel like people say they're busy almost like it's a boast disguised as a complaint, like humble bragging, right?
Yeah.
It's like, man, I don't know. I got a lot on my plate this week, man. I'll be in Raleigh this Saturday, and then we got to go to Greensboro Sunday morning, and I got to be back Sunday afternoon for a pickleball match. We're going for the semifinals in the club league, and then Monday morning sharp, man, I got to get on a plane. And
First
go
of
out
all,
to
nobody should
California.
ever humble brag about pickleball. I mean, like everybody plays it.
You
Old
heard
people
it here.
play it.
You heard it
You're
here
fine.
first.
Like,
folks.
I am
Nelson,
not
we got to be
impressed.
careful. Our audience is mostly pickleball players.
That's
and here's how
fine.
I know.
That's fine,
Our
but I'm
audience
just not
is comprised
impressed.
of mostly women between the ages of 45 and 55, white Americans from North Carolina. And you know what the biggest thing for women between 45 and 55 is?
Pickleball.
White? Yeah, pickleball, man.
Wine too.
Pickleball. Gonna have to get Jim Steele. I've been talking
do
about this
they
for a
have-
while.
are they
Gotta
gonna
get
have-
Jim Steele, the coach's chair, on the pod here in the near future to talk about pickleball.
Is
Why do people
pickleball going to
love
be
it
an
so
Olympic
much?
sport this year?
It won't be this year, but it's
got to
coming.
be.
It's
It's got to be
coming.
good.
You know
I mean,
it's
you got
coming.
breakdancing, you got
Yeah,
3-on-3
it's
basketball.
coming.
We have to do it.
So what do you think about this humble brag? I mean, are people
Yeah.
really
So
that
listen,
busy,
I'm going to
Nelson?
tell you, like when I was the most busy I've ever been.
Yeah.
I was working at Cape Fear, 8 classes per semester,
Mm-hmm.
and I was this was probably for a 2.5 year period, and I was on the board of education, and I was working there for like 30 or 40 hours, and I was getting. I mean, you think we get emails?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I was on the board, I would
Triple,
probably get.
quadruple that, yeah.
And if it was a busy time, like let's say we were redistricting or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, I had meetings nonstop. I was on the phone 4 or 5 hours.
So if you were getting
a day.
25 emails a day at work, how many were you getting for the Board of Education?
Oh my God, man! Like,
Double that? Triple
more
that?
than that. Yeah,
Really?
triple. And again, like
And of course, these are emails that you're supposed to actually read, take seriously, and possibly
yeah, they're from your
respond to, right?
constituents.
Yeah,
A
they're
lot of them
constituents.
are,
Yeah, yeah.
or they're things that I actually have to know about. Or,
At least the ones we get at work are sometimes from frivolous places, right? Like
But
someone trying to sell us a textbook.
Hey, let me tell you, it felt it was very stressful. But I will not lie
But
to
was
you.
it empowering a little bit?
It
Did
was.
you feel a little
It
important?
was. I did feel important.
Really?
Yes, because all of a sudden, like, I go from just living and
Just
doing
getting
what-
25 emails a day and teaching 8 classes to being your time being spoken for
I mean,
all
people,
night, every night.
Like, people from the press would call me and ask me if we were shutting down school because of a
people wanting
hurricane.
comment, right? People wanting comment.
Yeah, and I'm like, why are you asking me? But deep down, I'm like, yeah, that's right, bitches.
Was
Like,
anybody asking you questions that you felt like, God, I don't know the answer to this. I'm not an expert
like
in
I
this.
said, with the hurricane, like, why would you want me to?
You're
you
not
want
a meteorologist.
You want me to tell you that we should shut down schools? Like, that's not my job.
You're like, call Jim Cantori.
But you know, it is the job of the school system, but it's
Sure.
the job of the people who manage it, the superintendent,
Right.
those
It's not
experts,
a
the
board
assistant
decision
superintendent. No,
necessarily.
God, no.
Right.
But
they might
here's-
put the rubber stamp on it necessarily.
No, we don't even do
don't
that.
even do that,
Not in
okay.
this state. But like people do. Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I mean,
Well,
what do
yeah,
you
I
want
mean,
me to
board
do?
members have more important things to do, right?
It would be easy, I think, to fall into that trap of look how important I am, look how important I am. You know, and you see one of our board members, right, Josie Barnhart. She was talking about Battle of the Book. She said, "I can't believe that board members don't have a say in this."
Why would they?
Believe it?
Yeah,
You're just a
librarians,
board
parents,
member.
the kids
But
themselves.
you can see for some people it does go to your head. You do have this hyper sense of importance. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was playing golf with my dad. I drove down to see the guy, right?
Yeah.
And this is a man for whom the phone knew no bounds. I mean, when he was, he
So
missed
now
Little
he's
League
retired,
games.
right?
Now, so I'm down there playing golf with him. We're dealing with a 5-alarm fire up here. I don't know what it was. It
Yeah.
was some sort of crazy.
During your board days, okay.
Yeah. So I'm on the
So
phone.
you
I'm-
pulled a Ted Cruz when everybody else was like, on fire up here in Wilmington.
No,
you
the
took,
fire started.
You took off
no,
to
the
a,
fire
to a
started
resort
while I
down in
was
Florida.
gone.
Okay,
No, it was some, I can't remember what it was, but at the time,
wasn't a literal fire like the
No.
hurricane that.
but at the time,
or the
whatever
pandemic.
whatever it was, I remember felt suffocating. Felt like it was the most important thing that could ever be going on in
Yeah.
my life.
How'd that go with your dad?
And I'm sitting there answering emails. And you know what he tells me? He says, "You're not that important."
nice.
I was like,
It's
"Shit,
damn,
man."
If I had ever told my dad that, he would slap me.
Yeah, and looking back at all that, looking back
Yeah.
at that time, I do think it was the most impactful thing
Right.
I will ever do. I don't know what that says about me, my future, whatever. But yeah, I was probably way too attached.
Yeah.
And I think my kids would tell you that. I think my wife would tell you that.
Yeah.
And these are people who don't want me around that often.
Well, definitely a little later in the show. I mean, we're approaching the 30-minute mark, the halfway mark, but definitely I want to get into that a little bit later in the show, talking about how we know when we're too busy and how we know when we need to pivot or make a change. And oftentimes it is that other people tell us, right? They don't necessarily even tell us with their words, but they can tell us with their actions. They can tell us with their facial expressions. And I'm certainly guilty of this. But Nelson, I wanted to stop for a second and basically make certain that I let the audience know, many of whom are probably very busy, and not all of them are knowledge workers, white-collar workers. Many of them are hardworking, blue-collar, working-class Americans like I was most of my life, and like my father, my mother, and their mothers and father before them. And many of the people I still, call my friends and family. When I say that not everybody has to be so busy, I am basically suggesting that there should be another word for people that are working 2 shifts back to back in the ICU. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
These first responders, these frontline workers during the pandemic.
These cops
God
pulling a
bless them,
double.
right?
Yeah,
God bless all of these people.
Absolutely.
Doctors, the people who were risking their lives going in for 12, 15 hours, not because they just wanted to be busy, but because they were doing something bigger than themselves to keep things going during the global pandemic. I think about the custodians, everybody, the people working the cafeterias. Likewise, the people that we still see, right, in the city who take the bus and then the train and then the bus again to go to 3 minimum wage jobs just to keep their family fed, just to keep a roof over just to keep their kids from starving. These people, honestly, Nelson, we need to applaud. I want to say that first and foremost. So if you are one of these people, and chances are many of you are,
but we need to applaud
I don't mean
them.
to insult you. I want you to know that a more accurate term for describing what you're doing is you're just trying to stay alive. You're just trying to beat the odds. You're probably exhausted. You are among the walking dead.
Yeah.
And you really are.
So,
and we need to, again, respect you and applaud you. And I don't want to sit up here on my high horse and talk about, everybody's so busy and they can just dial it back or they need to focus on something else.
We are whiners.
The mom who's going to 3 jobs to keep her family from literally starving is not signaling she's important or signaling that she's powerful virtuously by saying, I'm crazy busy.
No, we're elitists.
You're not busy.
We're just whining.
You're literally exhausted and you're among the walking dead. And I literally respect you like no other. Now, for the rest of us, Nelson.
Yeah, we just got to
that
whine.
retort is, I believe, largely a ruse. What I mean is I think business serves one of maybe 3 or 4 purposes. And that only people like you and me, people that have some privilege and advantage, who have free time to sit here and do this podcast every week for an hour or 2, are busy because we're signaling something, or we're busy because we are distracting ourselves from something more important, or we're busy because we are craving and maybe we're being reinforced, maybe even addicted to this novelty-seeking behavior that doing things affords us. Or finally, that we are really status-driven, that we've bought into this idea that to be busy means to be productive, and to be productive means that you're going to succeed, you're going to advance.
Well,
but no matter who you are or why, almost everybody seems busier than they used to be, Nelson.
Well, I wanted to turn it real quick to when we started work, because I said work is new, right? Mm-hmm. I always look at the point at which the wild food supply fell short of meeting the needs of the entire global population, because that's when managed food production became necessary for survival.
So when we were agrarian and we were just walking around nomadically and there weren't a lot of people on the earth, there was plenty of time, energy, seeds, food
for most
to go around, right?
But like 11,000 years ago when we started settling and we created these permanent settlements, and we started saying, okay, well, society needs certain things. This new
going to carve
way
out
of living.
some land for this, carve out some land for that.
Exactly. We got to have
let's
prayers,
face it,
temples.
the beginning of capitalism almost. Let's face
in
it.
a way, right?
Ownership,
but
private ownership.
Yeah, but exactly. Acquiring wealth, passing it on, etc.
But got to manage now.
Right.
Got to manage our lives.
But even still, right, in that early time period, society needed things, and every person was supposed to contribute and provide a service, right?
Yeah.
And so that to me, gives you purpose and meaning. It means you count. It means
Knowing you have a
you're
job.
visible. You are part of something.
And you are.
And I do
because
feel,
if you're not there, it's going to break down.
But
If you don't have some output, it's going to break down.
but I do think, I don't think it's virtue signaling. I do feel
Not
like,
for them, I didn't.
and I don't think it is for us. I do feel like work gives us meaning and purpose. Did you know, and I'm sure you do because you're a psychologist, that the single most detrimental emotional thing that can happen to a person outside of their kids dying
Is retirement.
No. Retirement's probably look at the numbers of people who are like drinking more, doing drugs as they retire.
Die
right?
shortly after retirement.
Die shortly
Of course,
after,
that's
right?
correlational, right? We know that they die after.
Right.
They die probably from exhaustion, and they're already really old and overworked, and then they have no health care after they quit their jobs. Or retire.
Long-term unemployment is just emotionally crippling because it's how we identify with the world. When you and I meet,
and how we
and
identify
I say,
ourselves.
hi, Jason, my name is Nelson.
I do this.
And then you would say,
hey, I'm
oh,
Jason.
hey, Nelson. It's almost your first question. Oh, hey, Nelson, what do you do?
Yeah, it's definitely the second question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
Before, who's your family? Before, where are you from? Before, what do you like to do?
and people don't say I do teaching.
No.
I do firefighting.
I'm a fireman.
I am a teacher.
I am. Yeah.
I am. So it's how we see ourselves. It's such a big part of our self schema.
Yeah.
So I
a good
don't
point.
think it's just virtue signaling or people like to be busy because they like to feel like they matter.
But like when I'm not working, Nelson, I feel anxious, guilty sometimes.
Me too.
When I'm not either working or doing something to promote myself or my work, I feel like I'm missing something. And some people I know, they are now scheduling their time for friends, for family, for children. I mean, that just seems like we've gone too far. Again, I'm with you that yes, we like being busy. It does provide a value. Evolutionarily, it's made sense. And much of what we do, the busyness is enjoyed by us. We like it. There's a function to it. We do have to make money. We do have to manage things and keep our lives in order. But, I mean, come on. We're now scheduling 5-minute conversations, 15-minute coffee breaks, 30-minute play dates with our 5-year-old kids, with our neighbors down the street.
So what I will say is I think that scheduling...
we're trying to fit into each other's lives like a receptionist at a doctor's office trying to fit us in.
Yeah, I think overscheduling is problematic, but I think scheduling like the French do it, like the Germans do it, like, look, this is 35 hours and this is work and everything else is not work.
Yeah.
I don't think you should schedule not work.
Yeah,
I think you should just not work.
But here's the thing. In America, even if we were to say you've got to do 35 hours, there'd be that little caveat at the bottom of the contract that says minimum, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And you and I both know that if your employer says 35 hours minimum, you better be there more than 35 hours.
Well, if you want that promotion or if you want to
people to respect you, or if you want people to think that you're productive or that you matter or that you're important. Friends being too busy to participate in your life. Look, there's a story, not Cal Newport, someone else online I was reading about tells the story of a colleague's birthday. One person in the office was trying to get the people in the office together to celebrate the birthday. They chose like a Friday or Saturday night thinking, well, that'd be a good time since we don't have to work the next morning. And they were planning to do it around 6 or 7 o'clock, so not too late. Most people were like, no, absolutely not, too busy, can't fit it in. And I think historically, when you hear someone say that, you would think, oh, they must have work to do. They must have something really important, right? Like, I got to go and tend to my mom who's, in a nursing home, or I've got to go and care for my kid who's on a ventilator. In this story, one of the people told the lady trying to get the party together that she just wasn't going to be able to make it because she had an appointment at 7 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night at Crate and Barrel for flatware. What? Now, what does this say? I mean, you're not as important as flatware, or I'm so important that I have to schedule my flatware appointments because...
So I want to be careful about, I want to be careful about judging people's choices. I mean, it's not a choice I would make, but what's that old quote? If you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Sure. But
so, I mean,
going for flatware?
It's hard for me.
It's hard to imagine.
It's hard for me to imagine.
So that's why I think busyness is mostly a ruse or an illusion. It's like, I'm wondering, is it...
Maybe it's just a choice.
Well,
is it a choice that we just make because we want?
But some of us may be conscious and other parts are unconscious. And here's why I believe that, Nelson. If I were to ask you right now, what do you think brings you the most happiness throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout a month?
What brings me the most happiness?
When are you the happiest? What are you doing when you would say, generally speaking, you're the most happy? Throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout a month? Just give me an example.
Just hanging out with my family.
Okay, hanging out with family. Good.
Getting a hot
That's
tub.
what most people say. Is like vacationing, hanging out with family. They'll say stuff like doing nothing, right? Not having to be so busy, free time, vacation. They say those words. Years ago, one of my favorite psychologists and thinkers, Dan Gilbert, by the way, didn't graduate from high school, got his GED, and made it to Harvard as a professor. Not easy to do. I met him a couple times at conferences. I've read all of his books, and he's got a book called Stumbling Upon Happiness. And he does work into what makes people happy in his lab at Harvard called the hedonics lab. Years ago, when smartphones were just coming out around 2010, he assisted by his, I think, lab mate, created some software that would basically ping volunteers' phones randomly throughout the day and night. And when you got the ping, it was a reminder that you have to fill out a survey. And the survey was really simple. What are you doing and how happy are you? Right? So on a scale from 0 to 100, least happy you ever been in your life, 100% would be the most happy. You can't imagine anything making you happier. How happy are you right now? And then what are you doing? And some of the choices were sex.
I was going to say, well,
eating.
Who would interrupt the ping? Like, who would answer that?
They may do it after after it's done.
Okay.
I'm not saying they would necessarily interrupt sex, although
that wouldn't make
there's some evidence that people do look at their phones.
Have you
sex.
ever done that?
Never, not
no,
once.
Me neither.
But here's the thing. You would assume, and Gilbert assumed, that people would be picking things like spending time with family, sex, eating, and they would probably pick things like nothing. What were you doing just now? Right? Nothing. That's why I'm so happy. I don't have any responsibility. I'm doing nothing. I have free time. That is not what he found. While sex was near the top,
I'd be pretty happy.
The second or third wasn't free time. The fourth or fifth wasn't free time. Do you know what the answer doing nothing came in as?
I mean, I think it'd be pretty low, to be honest with you.
Last.
Yeah, I don't think doing nothing would be good.
Working a job you hate. People were reporting more satisfaction out of working a job they hate than nothing.
Of course.
Idleness, right?
Of course.
We hate it.
Well, yeah.
But here's the thing.
Nothing?
But evolutionarily, it makes sense, right? That we have a propensity, we have a natural genetically based propensity to do work. And we have a brain and a hormone system that's designed to sort of prop that up, don't we? You've heard of dopamine.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about
Well, let me start with the dopamine theory of work first.
Okay.
All right. So think of it this way. Every time you do any kind of work, whether it's pulling the handle on a slot machine, whether it's scrolling through your social media feed, checking an unread email, driving to work, walking to your office, sitting down in the meeting on time, you're getting a little hit of dopamine.
Hell yeah, man.
Not a lot, but you're getting a little drip.
Hey, look, I get it.
And
man.
dopamine's not just about pleasure. I want to make this clear to my audience, right? Here's one thing to remember about it. Researchers who've looked at when dopamine rises and falls find that it's not when you win, when you lose, when something surprising happens. It's none of those things. People don't get an increase in dopamine when they win something or when something fun happens, and vice versa, get a huge drop just because you lose. No, they get a hit of dopamine when they're seeking, when they're doing anything, when they're playing, when they're trying, when they're in the game, right? So the act of pulling, the act of walking, the act of touching, that's the work that reveals the hit of pleasure. When you win or lose at a slot machine, when you check your email and you find out that it's a good email or it's something that's terrible and you got to go do work and put a fire out, dopamine falls.
Right.
Win or lose, dopamine falls. But playing, it rises.
Right.
So how do you get that dopamine back? You got to keep playing.
Gotta keep playing.
So one argument for why we're so busy is that we're chasing the dopamine high. We're trying basically to keep ourselves from feeling bored, meaningless, rudderless, purposeless.
Well, going back to...
And that's okay, except when you're driving down the road at 75 miles an hour, right?
Yeah,
and you're
definitely.
checking the phone because you're bored from just driving. Or, again, if you're trying to have dinner with your family, or you're at a funeral, or you're at a job interview, or you're in class, you're a student, you're in class.
Well,
you're checking the phone mindlessly because you're getting that little drop of dopamine. I don't know that that's conscious, right?
So I'm actually reading a book called Past Presidents.
Yeah.
And it's about how each president coped with losing power.
Ah.
And you know, again, my situation obviously
Instantly
much smaller.
become unimportant, instantly become maybe bored.
When I lost my seat and all the phone calls stopped and all the questions
Lost
stopped.
a little meaning and purpose.
Yeah, it was very difficult. I know that sounds strange to people. It was very difficult because I'm like, nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, what a privilege.
It was really difficult to work that little. And at first I found things, I'm like, oh, I've been wanting to do this. I've been wanting to read this. I've been wanting to write that.
I can do all these other things that I wanted
all these
to do.
other things. And it was kind of empty. I'm like, okay, well, it's not what I thought it was going to be. It wasn't as enjoyable. And I do think I have a touch of alexithymia. You know, sharks can't stop moving.
No,
because
can't
if they
stop
stop moving, they die.
Yeah.
And
it's probably good for us to be hypervigilant, at least evolutionarily. We didn't want to stop what we were doing.
Do animals work?
Oh my
is
God.
working unique to human beings?
No, I said earlier, I at least sort of mentioned this, that all mammals seem to do work, especially dogs. And now we
do
train,
have a working group of dogs.
Yeah, we
right?
breed them to be really hyper-focused on work. But yeah, they love to work. They love to be busy, as it were. They love to do things. You could say that they are addicted to work. They have behavioral compulsions like humans do. Now,
Right.
if you take a dog that's bred to do certain types of work in certain types of environment, and you mismatch them by putting them in a different environment, or ask
Like
them
say
to
a
do
husky in an apartment.
yeah, then you're going to run into problems, right? You're going to
Right,
see
yeah,
that the
they're gonna
dog
be
is
misbehaved.
anxious,
Yeah,
misbehaved.
yeah.
You might call it misbehavior when really maybe it isn't. And honestly, maybe this is what's going on with ADD, particularly those boys with hyperactivity. You know, one of the arguments is that these boys are just fidgety. They are into stuff. They are distracted. They are hard to control. They are compelled to be moving. And so they don't always make for good students. They don't always make for good kids sitting in church for an hour or two. It may be because we're mismatching them. Think about this. Evolutionarily speaking, a little boy or girl for that matter who's hyperactive would have been evolutionarily adapted to their environment. They are growing up and learning how to be vigilant and take in the whole world and look at lots of different things. There's a lot of threats around all the time.
Yeah.
Then stick them in a classroom thousands of years later and say, now be real quiet, pay attention singularly to this boring instructor or professor talking about something that you can't see any practical value in the here and now. Certainly no evidence to suggest anything you're learning is going to save your life, get you food, or get you sex immediately.
Well,
So I think they're mismatched.
you know,
in large part.
our listeners will know that I have a serious man crush on Teddy Roosevelt. And if Teddy Roosevelt had been born today, he would have been given ADD,
Yeah.
become a salesman or something, and you never would have heard from him again. But he is an exemplar of work, of the strenuous life, of the purpose-driven life.
Mm-hmm.
There was a story where he was in class at Harvard, right? He was a top student.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking so much, and I know you and I have had students like this, right?
Yeah.
He was talking so much, the professor snapped at him. He said, "See you here, Roosevelt. Let me talk." He was just like, he wouldn't shut up. He wouldn't stop moving. A doctor told him, he said, "Dude, you have a very poor constitution." You know, he was asthmatic. He said, "You should not expect to live a long life. In the little time you have, I would be as sedentary as possible." And he said, "I'm not doing that."
Yeah.
He said, I'm gonna race up every flight of stairs. I'm gonna run through every hill." He's like, "No, hell no. I gotta move."
I'm gonna go get her, man. You know, back to this idea that it might be in our DNA, it might be evolutionarily, we might be predisposed evolutionarily to be busy. I think about the fact that we do a lot of random tasks. Again, we seem to make ourselves busy doing randomness that really doesn't amount to much.
Well, give me an
right?
example.
Well, oh gosh, I mean sweeping, for instance. It's just beating back the dirt, as my friend Ronnie Kirkland used to
That's
say.
a good point.
As soon as you sweep, you're going to need to sweep again, right?
Right.
And some people will sweep 3 or 4 times a day. If I didn't get onto my wife, she would sweep and vacuum maybe 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah, Amanda would want me to.
She also will, wash clothes 50 times. Like she'll do a lot of times. She will go through the mail, not once, but like 10 times a day. It seems like just busyness to me, or it seems like one of those working dogs that's just in the wrong place, moving, trying to find something more meaningful to do. Even when she's standing, listening, She's moving back and forth, checking her phone, doing like 1,000 things at once. So that could be largely unconscious, obviously, or conscious, couldn't it?
Yeah.
To look at it from a conscious perspective, you could think about sort of the cultural demands again to being busy, to staying busy, or maybe even trying to prove to yourself that you're worth it, prove to yourself that you're doing something.
Yeah.
Many believe that busyness has become a signal again that you're in high demand, that your time is precious. Some believe that it's about distracting yourself from more important things, maybe distracting yourself from more necessary things.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't think it matters
Why?
whether or not you are busy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it matters whether or not you are happy.
Yeah.
And some people are genuinely pleased being busy and spending their time busting their asses and working.
Well,
I love my job.
That certainly seems to be the case with Dan Gilbert's research. Let me give you a thought experiment while I'm thinking about it.
Let's do
Nelson.
it.
So you said when I asked you to think about an average day, what makes you happy? I want to ask you another thing. If you wanted to demonstrate to yourself or anyone else that you had a productive day at work, what are some things you'd list off? Like, how do you know that you were productive at work? Whether it's 4 hours, 8 hours, or more. I mean, what are some things that you kind of have in mind for a productive day at work?
I would talk, for my specific
Like
job.
you got to have an evaluation. They're like, what did you do this week? What did you do at work this semester?
I would talk about some really good lectures, really good back and forth that I had.
What else?
with
What
a
they say, I want some
student.
more measurable outcomes. Let me give you
A number of papers I've graded.
Okay,
Number
emails returned.
emails returned.
How many complaints did you have?
Yeah, letters of recommendation that I've
Nice, really.
signed.
How many times you were there on time?
Sure. Committees that I've led.
Office hours?
Forums that I've put together. Yeah, hours that hours would be at the bottom of the
Okay,
list.
but still,
for me.
Now let me ask you another thought experiment. You're on your deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
You're just about to die, and you're reflecting back on life. How do you know if you had a good life, meaningful life?
I don't think I
And
could.
before you answer, how many of those things that you just said would be on that list?
None of those.
None of
things.
those. And so that, like, when I think about meaning and purpose, I think lying on my deathbed, what would I reflect on and go, man, that was meaningful, that was purposeful. And here's how I know it would be meaningful and purposeful, because it would come to my mind. The number of emails I answered wouldn't come to my mind. The number of times I was on task on my job wouldn't come to my mind.
Well, that's why I would never list those as being productive.
Yeah.
Like,
But you were just saying before that, like some people their work gives them meaning. And I would say,
well, like Mr. Beast.
I feel like that's large. Well, Mr. Beast's work is easier, I think, because he's giving away money and changing people's lives in the immediate term, right? Like you and I we
I
go
feel
into
like I
class
do
and we
that
change
every
lives.
day.
We change lives, but only moderately, like really minuscule, and we don't even know we do it until maybe a year or two later again, like we
Yeah,
were
but
saying earlier.
when other people okay, but there are other jobs that I feel, and I'm not, look,
Mm-hmm.
people work and find meaning in all sorts of types of work. But for me, for an ADD guy
Mm-hmm.
who's, worried about their deathbed, worried about mattering, I need a job that I can change even just a little bit of life, that I can
And so
just
I guess-
matter in a little bit.
And I guess for me, I feel like I need that too, but I don't think that ultimately gives me that meaning. I believe that.
Well, where do you get it?
I get it from the interactions with my family and friends. I get it from going and watching my kids play soccer or engaging in play with them. I get it from petting my dogs. I get it from grilling out in the summer with my kids or my family. I get it from going to a bar and hanging out with people and talking and catching up. I get it from, talking on the phone with people in my family. I get a taste of deep, meaningful life, not through work usually, not through the day-to-day grind, certainly not at Crate and Barrel. I tell you, I glimpse it every year. I go back in time.
Well,
Did you know that? I go back in time every year.
Well,
I go back to Indiana, Newcastle. I was just telling my wife that I love doing it. She thinks it's some big deal that I enjoy doing it, but I'm like, no, it's a pleasure. I go and I hang out with her family, many of them older than me. And you know what we do? We
nothing.
sit around mostly and play cards, have conversations. Occasionally we'll play like a family sport, like, volleyball or ride go-karts or go swimming or maybe throw the bags, right? Throw the cornhole. But usually it's just sitting around and fellowshipping, catching up, talking to each other. And there's nothing more fun because it's so damn slow, so deep, so real, so meaningful. Like when I say, man, I'm going to miss you, or man, it's good to catch up, or man, that's an awesome story. When I'm laughing at one another, we're laughing at each other's jokes. Like that stays with us all year. When I go back, they'll say, you got any new jokes? Like it's so slow and so old school, and yet the highlight of my year. It's amazing. And my kids and their cousins, nobody's really on phones. Everybody's playing. Again, and just for a week, we get to do this, we get to see this, we get to feel this.
But if you did that all the time, you wouldn't know it was special.
No, but at the same time, why does it have to be once a year? Could I start incorporating some of those kinds of elements, slowing down into my life? Honestly,
let me tell
the
you-
reason I stay busy with the podcast, it isn't just because I can get up here and talk about things I may or may not know something about. It's spending time once a week with you. And by the way, this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, lets me engage and meet new people like you, right?
Yeah.
Like
our
Carl
listener.
that I've met from Hawaii through this, making better engagement connections with all kinds of listeners, like, Rebecca up in Maryland or Virginia, I forget, who has a little son named Caleb that my daughter grew up with here. She's moved away, but we stay engaged through this. Some sort of making old acquaintances new again. Amy, who I just made contact with, who is a school teacher in South Carolina. I believe she's also a yoga instructor and a writer. She and I weren't really close in school. I think she was a year behind me, but she and I have been engaging lately. So there's this value that this brings. And I think that if I were too busy doing nonsense, I wouldn't be able to cultivate new or even hold on to my old relationships in any meaningful way.
Well, let me tell you, I had 13 years of every day, my first 13 years as a young professional. I was in the Army, I was a police officer, working a job that I absolutely dreaded going to.
Yeah.
Every day I put on a uniform with a name tag, and I was just so unhappy and so miserable. And 13 years in, I was able to change my career for less pay, substantially less pay, go in a different direction. And you know how my day starts? I do the very things that you're talking about that you enjoy.
Yeah.
I go and I meet you. You're usually down there.
Yep.
I get a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I go up to the office. Sometimes people are there, sometimes they're not, but I sit. I talk about ideas. I talk about what I'm working on. I'll go back into my office. Yeah, I'll answer a few emails or something, and I get ready for a class, tickle the brain, get excited about what's new in my field, what research I'm bringing in, what topics I'm going to discuss. And then I spend hours every day talking about things I love with strangers.
Yeah.
Who engage with me, who give me feedback.
And then after
who
the semester's
challenge
over,
me.
you get to do it all again
Do
with a
it
whole
all
new group
again.
of students, right?
So I don't mind being busy in that. I don't mind doing the parts that I don't really enjoy, like grading papers.
But now we have Nelson, that's a beautiful story, and I concur with you completely. I love the job as well, and I do something very similar and have been for 25 years and would love to continue doing it to the extent that my employer lets me, and then my health will allow me. But I worry about all of the people who don't have that kind of flexibility, whose jobs are under observation more closely. I think about
I do too.
those blue-collar workers who don't have the luxury of going to lunch anytime they want or stopping and taking a break anytime they want. But I also think about these knowledge white-collar workers who now, more than ever, thanks to IT departments, thanks to new tracking technologies, thanks to all of these chat channels like Slack, Zoom, MS Teams, you would think...
Yeah, the demands on their time
You would
are...
think that would make for a better, more efficient, more productive workplace, right? Like if the
Right.
boss is using all this tech,
Yeah.
the boss knows you're working hard. The boss could check up if they wanted to. So the boss has no reason to be paranoid anymore. Yet, I think in part, thanks to this pandemic, bosses have become more paranoid about, hey, what are my employees really doing? And how can they prove to me that they're working?
Well, I think most
But vice versa,
employees...
and more importantly, now we become paranoid of the bosses because
Absolutely.
they're, quote, tracking you.
Absolutely.
And then I'm going to lose possibly trust for my boss, and that's going to create a vicious cycle. Current Gallup data, Nelson, I just read from 2022, revealed that 21% of employees say they do not trust their company leaders. 1 in every 5 workers in America, white collar workers, don't trust their leaders.
Well, my bet
That's
is
crazy.
that 3 out of 5 are afraid to tell the truth.
Oh, yeah,
maybe
there's that too.
maybe think the Gallup poll is also lying, because that seems way low to me.
So what's the solution?
But let me ask you, do you answer emails? Do you ever feel pressure to answer emails
I'm
when you're
glad.
not at work?
By the way, we're going into that right after this last break. We'll finish up, ladies and gentlemen.
In a recent survey of 12,000 people across 15 countries, a shocking 75% of office workers said that they had experienced burnout in the past year. Burnout is defined as chronic workplace stress, or constant feelings of energy depletion and exhaustion. Not only has this become more common in the past decade, but post-pandemic, it has reached, well, epidemic proportions.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just listening, I'm Jason McCoy alongside my friend and co-host Nelson Bowyer. We are the cast of Put 'em on the Couch, and we're talking about busyness, hustle culture today, the feeling that you got to keep moving or else what? Moss will grow or you'll die, right?
Yeah, like a shark.
Just like the shark.
Like a shark, man.
So what's the solution? Nelson, some people are quiet quitting. Some people are quitting. But most of us, I dare say, the majority of us
Are adapting to it, huh?
And not only that, but we're doubling down.
Yeah.
We're
I know.
feeling compelled to work longer hours than ever.
Yeah.
And here's the weird thing. It's the high status people. It's white collar people. It's people who don't have to work hourly. They're paid salaries that seem to be putting in more and more hours. Survey after survey tells us
yeah.
we're working longer hours. We have to constantly be available to, quote, prove our dedication and our productivity. And part of this is we're distracting ourselves from maybe existential anxiety. We got to die one day and we don't want to leave the world without worth, without leaving some legacy. That's possible for some of us narcissists. Another possibility is that this is just ingrained into us, into our DNA, where we seek novelty. And so to the extent that doing certain things makes us bored, we want to do other things. Email might seem boring on the surface because it's just checking these little words that pop up. But when you dig into it, you realize some of these messages are very different, very exciting. Whereas if you go home and cook, it's kind of the same thing every day, right? If you go home and walk your dog, it's kind of the same path every day. So there may be some of that dopaminergic sort of activity going on. Another possibility is, yes, the status symbol. I'm working to prove that I'm important, I'm in demand. If I go to a doctor and they say, yeah, we can fit you in right now, I don't know that I want to see that doctor because I think he must not be very good or she must not be very good if they can just see me right away, if they got opening. I'm used to calling my doctor saying, man, I need to see you. And the receptionist say, well, he's got something next week, that maybe he's got 15 minutes next week. And you're like, what? That's awful. Yeah, I'll take it because he's in so demand. Now, Nelson, this presenteeism, as it's actually been called, this desire to prove your worth, prove your value through being present is taking a very sinister turn. Now we have digital presenteeism.
Yeah, you got to be on.
You got a phone now.
Yep.
You got a computer. And you've got to be on even when you're not there.
Yep, that's what's expected.
So now the expectation is be at work 8 hours if you're a white collar for sure, but really more than that. And since you could technically leave early, you better stay late. And while you're there, I want you to be present in all the physical meetings. I want you to do all the things you're supposed to do. But then I also want to be able to email you, text you, Slack message you, Zoom with you. I also want to be able to pop by the office, so you better be in there. And then when you leave, I also want you to be available to answer any questions I have after hours. Again, this is not the same across the world.
You know,
Italy,
I'm so glad
in
you brought
Italy,
this up,
we
though.
still have the most successful, most powerful, most wealthy, have the most free time, have the most money. They can blow their free time and their money. They can do whatever they want. They do it that way. They spend more time with friends and family. They see that as part of meaning in life, a big part of it. In America,
It's an
we're
American
still
problem,
connected
man.
with that.
So,
We're still
I'm gonna tell
connected
you
with that
something
idea, that pathos that says, got to be working to prove that we can do it.
But you know, it's so weird because we think it's like this life and death stuff and it's so important. So we're getting ready to go on vacation, right? My dad used to take his family on vacation 30 years ago.
Yeah.
There was no phone. There was no cell.
No.
And do you know what happened when he got back?
It would be there.
Nothing.
Nothing would
It
happen.
was
It'd be there.
okay. Like nobody
You
could
find
call
out,
him.
right?
Nobody could tell
Well,
him.
when
Nobody
you
could
can't
email
get in
him.
touch with me about something, you find out that
okay.
it's actually not that bad. And how do you know it's not bad? Because nobody dies. Nobody's ever died because I didn't answer an email within the first 10 minutes of receiving it.
Right.
Nobody's died.
And it's funny because everybody, even like our counter narrative about ourselves, oh man, Americans are so lazy. That's bullshit. We're not lazy.
Especially poor people. They're the hardest working.
Oh yeah, we work more money, or we work more hours
than
for
anybody
less
else on the
money
earth.
than any other
Anybody
Western
on this earth.
democracy.
And we take less vacation.
Well, not anybody on earth, like
But no.
Chinese
any other
laborers,
Western or any other advanced democracy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's also another problem, Nelson. A UK firm.
But we do take less vacation.
Yeah, a UK firm just surveyed white collar workers in England, Wales, Scotland, right, Ireland, and found that this new phenomenon of leavism, not to be confused with presenteeism, right, but leavism is also becoming a thing. You ever heard of that?
No. I
Apparently,
don't think so.
it's the practice of using allocated time off, think sick leave, personal leave, annual leave, to be prevalent or present or, quote, productive.
So just
Can you
unused
believe that?
vacation days?
Just use the time that you're supposed to take off to work. Now,
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
not doing
in our workplace, we get a couple of personal days a year. Should be no questions asked. You can just schedule yourself off, right?
I do.
First of all, most people they schedule days off that they're already off, or they just leave them in the bank and find out at the end of the semester or year that they don't roll over. They really were never banked. I believe more people don't take their time off than do now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And
We have so many
but
unused
think about
vacation
it.
days and
Why
sick
would
days.
I if I've got to be present even when I'm off? I still get emails from my boss when I'm off. I still get phone calls. I still have work to do when I'm off. I still have work to do to get off. I have work to do when I get back, right?
And the funny thing is, I don't think it'd be
paperwork.
unreasonable for somebody to say, look, I'm not answering an email. I'm off.
Well, that's just it.
I'm off.
But who
you
would
would
do it?
be
You need
a bad
everybody to do it.
employee.
You'd be a pariah. You'd be a bad
You would be a bad employee.
Everybody's got to do it.
Yep.
Everybody's got to do it. I've even said to my boss before, hey, am I supposed to be checking text and emails every hour of every day, including weekends? And he even said, look, I check my work email when I go to the bathroom. Like, I check my work email all the time. He's like, it's just better to do that. You just keep the fires out. You keep them from getting bigger. It's sort of at your own risk. If you don't check your email all the time and you let it go a couple of days, then don't be surprised if when you come back on Monday after a weekend, you've got a meeting about
Well, when I come back
something, or
into the
you've got-
country and I get 1,000 emails,
Oh, they're coming.
or when I get, or even just getting off a plane, I'm on a 4 or 5 hour
and you
flight.
hear those dings.
Ding, ding, ding. The anxiety.
And
There's
by the
no
way, when you
dopamine
look
kick
at,
there, my
by
friend.
the way, when you look at them, and there's a couple hundred of them, maybe 1,000 of them,
Four
how many of them
important.
were even important?
Four.
And then when you do call the person back, do they go, "Oh my God, sorry, Cindy died," or "Oh my God, sorry, my house burned down, you weren't there"?
No.
You're like, well, even if I were available to answer the email, I wouldn't have been able to help you. Right?
Yeah,
I
usually-
can't stop your house
usually.
from burning down. I couldn't stop Cindy from dying. I'm not a doctor.
So look, as we wrap, man, give me a diagnosis and maybe a little prescription. How can we fix this?
Being busy, Nelson, is not the same thing as being productive. In fact,
Yeah.
I would make the case that largely being busy is just an illusion of productivity.
Like busy work.
Yeah. And secondly, being productive isn't always the same thing as doing meaningful, deep work, the Cal Newport calls it. Deep work is the kind of stuff that's going to last. It's going to leave a legacy. It's going to imprint itself and motivate other people. It's going to build up people and strengthen social bonds. And lastly, I would argue that you've done deep, meaningful work. You've been productive as a human on this earth. If on your deathbed you lie there and you can think of lots of different things that you've done, that you've accomplished, that matter to you, right? And guaranteed for most of us, how many emails we looked at, how many messages we sent back on Slack, how often we kept our inbox clean, that's not even going to come on our radar.
No.
It's not even going to come on our radar.
Well,
the number
we
of
just
times your
had
kids smile when they're playing catch with you,
Oh, yeah.
number of walks you go on, you see your dog run off the leash and go jump in the pond chasing a duck. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that's going to matter at the end of our life. And so
Well, we just had a friend
What are
work
we working
up
for?
until his very last days.
we sure did, man.
And,
Again,
I
rest
do
in
be-
peace,
I-
Mr. Bob Brennan.
I do believe that when he died, I know he wasn't concerned about the emails or the
No.
meetings, but I do believe that he had that deep work that you were talking
Well,
about.
I hope he was
I
reflecting
think
on what he mattered to people,
loved that job.
how he moved students.
Right. A deep, meaningful work.
And I hope he reflected on this idea that what he believed about a variety of topics that are going to sustain you and others. Use your free time with your family and your friends. Use your free time going for a walk. Use your free time to read a book. Use your free time to go out to the water's edge and just contemplate life.
Well,
use your free time the way the greats did, like Thoreau.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be doing just that. I'm going to take your prescription and follow it to the letter. On Monday, my family and I will be, checking off the bucket list bit by bit. We're going to head to London for a few days. My oldest daughter and I are going to go to Paris for a trip, and then the whole family, we are going to travel to Tanzania, and we are going to see the wildebeest cross the Mara
how the
River.
other 2/3 of the world live.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to doing those things, because that is why we work. I work and I get meaning from it, but I promise you this, I wouldn't be doing it for free.
No.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Appreciate your time and appreciate all your engagement. Hope you continue to engage with us. Like us, please follow us, and pass this episode on to someone you think might get value from this. We really appreciate you, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye,
you,
guys.
Nelson.
Tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition, yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the street the traffic's jumping, with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. 9 to 5. Give it up for Dolly Parton!
Working 9 to 5.